The location of this attack was no accident. The terrorists chose to strike at the heart of our capital city.
Intelligence gathered by this and other governments leaves no doubt that the Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised. We've learned that Iraq has trained al-Qaeda members in bomb making.
I know there's a threat to the country.
We know that Iraq and al-Qaeda have had high-level contacts that go back a decade.
We knew Saddam Hussein harbored Zarqawi, the terrorist we have seen.
He's a threat because he is dealing with al-Qaeda.
And nobody's ever suggested in this administration that Saddam Hussein ordered the attack.
The famous 28 redacted pages in the 9/11 report have finally been released. And it pretty much says what we thought it said. So Benjamin Norton reports here. While in the United States, some of the September 11th hijackers were in contact with and received support or assistance from individuals who may be connected to the Saudi government, states the previously redacted portion of the 2002 Joint Congressional Inquiry into the 9/11 attacks. FBI and CIA documents disclose that while some of the September 11th hijackers were in the U.S., they likely had contact with Saudi intelligence officers, the pages reveal. The declassified document also shows that the intelligence community had information, quote, indicating that individuals associated with the Saudi government in the United States may have other ties to al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups. Let me give you some more facts on this so you see just how big of a problem this is. Quote, the Western-backed Saudi regime has also spent an estimated $100 billion in the past few decades exporting its extremist interpretation of Islam throughout the world, infusing its fundamentalist ideology in its ostensible charity work, funding madrasas, mosques, and other institutions, often in poor Muslim communities. Despite this, the Saudi regime remains a close U.S. ally. In the past several years, the Obama administration has done more than $100 billion in arms deals with Saudi Arabia. We are building up our biggest enemy. Look, don't get it twisted. You can call it whatever the fuck you want to call it. Bottom line is, whatever it is, we are arming it. And we're supporting it. And we're propping it up. And then we know that they're spreading it all around the world. Did you know that with the Syrian refugee crisis, what was Saudi Arabia's response? Yeah, we're not going to take anybody, so fuck off. But here's what we will do, because we're so kind. We'll pay for new mosques in Europe. Send the refugees to Europe, and we'll build these mosques. What mosques are they building, by the way? Are they building lovely Sufi mosques where they talk about peace and enlightenment and mysticism? No. Are they building Ahmadi mosques where they talk about how, you know, the best interpretation of Islam is to be super kind to poor people and to love one another? No, they ain't building those kinds of mosques. They're building Wahhabi mosques. So wake up! Now the U.S. government admits, yeah, it's not official Saudi policy, but it's aspects of the Saudi government. Of course, they're the extremists. They funded the 9/11 terrorists. They fund al-Qaeda. That seems like a problem to me. And for everybody who would think, no, just look at Saudi Arabia's government and how they function today. Like, what, you think all of a sudden they're going to be moral in other areas when they declare all atheists are terrorists? When they behead people?
The terrorists attacked us and killed 3,000 of our citizens before we started the freedom agenda in the Middle East.
I want Americans and all the world to know American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
Iran has made it clear that it will continue to defy the will of the international community. Time after time, sanctions have hit the Iranian economy hard. That is true. But Iran's leaders, well, they just grit their teeth and they move forward. Iran enriches more and more uranium. It installs faster and faster centrifuges. It's still not crossed the red line I drew at the United Nations last September. We cannot allow Iran to cross that red line. Words alone will not stop Iran. Sanctions alone will not stop Iran. Sanctions must be coupled with a clear and credible military threat.
Caliphate is a land of peace and plenty. This recently posted ISIS propaganda video from Mosul would have the faithful believe. People are coming and going, says this man. People are happy. Ask those who have fled the city, however, and it's a different picture. From the outside, it looks nice. Nice pictures, says Salem. But in reality, it's a life of fear and hardship. While yet another truckload of women and children arrives, they escape the ISIS-controlled town of Hawija in central Iraq. Relief workers set up a school in the camp, but there are no classes here. The school now shelters hundreds of women and children whose menfolk are still in security detention. When ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi declared the re-establishment of the caliphate on the 29th of June 2014, he called upon the faithful to rush to his new realm. You'll own Rome and conquer the world, he said. This is what's become of that delusion. I asked if he'd seen the ISIS clips portraying Mosul as a paradise. In the beginning, it was all right, he says, but then they started ordering around and killing people. Everyone is afraid of them. The war with ISIS has driven around 3.5 million Iraqis from their homes, as yet another generation grows up amidst death, destruction, and displacement.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."